Matt, we are back for another Cybersecurity Tech Talk sponsored by Hillstone Networks. And today's, this is our 12th one of the year. It's December, and we're going to do something a little different than we usually do. What are we going to do?
So, it's funny. Before we get into what we're going to do, it doesn't seem like it's been a year, does it?
It doesn't. Time
seems
fly.
like just yesterday we're, kicking off in January and having to, because it's end of year and because this is like a really kind of fun time, we're going to do kind of a predictions discussion. Like, what do we see in the market?
Like what is
before we do that, go ahead, sorry.
Like, what is the state of cybersecurity in 2023 and where do we see it going?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's happening today? Where do we see it going? And we have some really, really cool guests. In fact, today we have the only repeat guest of 2023.
Who's that?
Have you thought about that? So, we've done all these podcasts. Well, so we're going to get to that in a second. But first, we're going to do this. We thought it'd be really fun to bring in another analyst friend to kind of give another perspective. And so we an esteemed member of the Hillstone family. So first, let's reintroduce founder and CTO at Tim Liu. How are you doing, Tim?
Pretty good. Hi, Matt. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Tim. Good to see you. Always good to see you.
Excellent to see you again. And we have this is an interesting one, right? Because us analysts tend to think, we know everything. And we do. But we have someone who knows even more than we do, strangely enough. We have the director of Cybersecurity Advisory based in Singapore, the director of cybersecurity, Mr. Kenny Yeo from Frost Sullivan. So, Kenny, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to get in touch with you guys again.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So let's jump in, okay? Talk about what we've been seeing in 23, what we think we're going to see in 2024. And let's kind of start at the macro level, if you will, okay? Kind of higher level. My view is kind of like, it's all about the data. When we talk about today's enterprises, when we talk about today's businesses, government agencies, it doesn't matter. Data is king, right? Data rules, and every organization is focused on how to make use of that data. And because of that, data is perhaps the biggest, it is the biggest target of hackers and ne'er-do-wells that want to try and exploit organizations, right? Let's kind of dig into this a little bit. Kenny, you've been in the marketplace for a long time. You are the a director of advisory services around cybersecurity. What do you see? I mean, are we on kind of target when we say this? And what have you seen from a kind of attack vector, attack method, kind of perspective from the industry?
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Matt. I mean, one of the things that we've seen, and we've go through maybe three broad macro trends in our further discussion, but let's start off with what you mentioned about data, right? I agree with you completely. Data is what the organization or the criminal organizations are after, right? If you think about this from the psychology of an attacker, what are they doing this for, right? I mean, it's interesting to think about this from the adversary's mindset. They are doing this for money. They're doing this for financial gain. This is not for fun, although we do see some of that mischievous behavior, but most of it is because they want to earn money. You earn money by transferring files, you're transferring money, transferring funds, and in a corporate organization, a large organization, it would be precious intellectual property that can be used for ransom. It can be used for other to sell it to a competitor or something else, right? So I think that's really one of the key things that we always see. It's really about the data, like you mentioned. When the data is there, and criminal organizations want to get that to get financial gain.
We did some research some time back and kind of validated it with some other firms. And what we've found is the average enterprise has over 50 cybersecurity tools deployed across the environment. And they run largely in siloed kind of, very point kind of solutions where there's not that tight integration. That's part one. Part two, there's something like 1,500 cybersecurity companies in the world.
Yeah.
How is an enterprise supposed to figure out what tools are best for their business and their business needs and how you integrate all of these solutions? You can say API all day long, but do these solutions truly play well together? Do they integrate nicely? And is there a centralized console to drive all of these? These are the complexity issues that a lot of enterprises struggle with day in and day out, and they're not even aware of some of the solutions out there.
Yeah. So as you said, that's actually different. Dozens of tools that enterprise uses, right? And they don't play well exactly with each other because they are not really aware of each other. So as you said, they play in silos. They basically have different management solutions, one for each one of the vendors probably. And that's why, you probably see today a lot of people interested in like the SecOps solutions, like, maybe XDR, maybe SIEM, sort of try to tie everything together. I think that's one of the trend that we see. People try to manage the complexity that you mentioned. Yeah.
Correct. I agree with you. I mean, in some of the surveys that we've done, we actually see that most organizations, something ranging from around 60 to 80%, depending on the country, would have a high level of cybersecurity complexity. Now, this is something like Tim mentioned, it's not something that they want. It's something they typically have had to deal with over time, because organizations, they buy solutions at different points of time, right? So some solutions are still running. Something is still legacy, is still working, right? And, the finance team is not going to let them throw it out. It has to integrate with something new. Maybe that's cloud first, maybe that's cloud deployed. And there's digital transformation projects, there's legacy applications, and all with the same team, same resources, right? The same overworked guys trying to do the best that they can. So, we talked about the first trend being data and cloud and proliferation of that. The second trend, exactly as Tim has mentioned, around the macro environment, is really that complexity. How are organizations supposed to deal with this? Because it's something that is a fact of life. No organization has everything brand new, right? No organization will be able to just say, I'm going to throw everything out, I'm going to buy everything brand new. It's not possible. So how do we help organizations deal with that complexity? That's a big question.
Right. And to be fair, this is not a problem that's unique to cybersecurity, right? You look in observability, you look in infrastructure, you look in cloud, right? Every cloud is managed differently, but yet we try to cross cloud boundaries. I mean, these poor IT guys, right? It's every segment, right? But we're talking about cybersecurity today. So how do we solve it, Matt? The complexity problem.
That's a good question. But to add to this complexity, right? There's a complexity of tool chain. There's also a complexity of environment. Kenny, you brought up cloud, right? And it's cloud and clouds. But it's not just that. It's the proliferation of the edge as well. The biggest grower of data or contributors to data growth today is happening out on the edge. And the edge can be anything from, you mentioned banks, to retail, to industrial platforms that are, either, treating water or drilling for oil, right? And some of these are old platforms. How do you secure those, right? I mean, there's going back. This is like, man, I guess you can look at it one of two ways. It's either a really fun time to be an IT person, or it's a really scary time to be an IT person. I don't know which way I go on that.
Correct. I agree with you. I mean, one of the trends, just on broadly speaking, has been also 5G. If you think about 5G, it's a perfect enabler for what you just mentioned about edge, right? About the edge compute, about edge capabilities and IoT devices. So just think about Uber, right? Every device, which is a mobile phone in the car, is an IoT device. It's gathering data, it's sending the data back to a central database somewhere in the cloud or somewhere in the data center. And that is exactly what you mentioned about the edge. That's enabled by 4G, 5G, and this is only going to proliferate, right? China has a huge ecosystem of EV. Every single car is now actually connected. And at Frost Sullivan, we actually call this the software-defined vehicle now, right? So it's more and more a data collection device. So the data that we talked about cloud, we talked about IoT, the edge, and we talk about complexities all coming together. Unfortunately, is really that, with the same resources, overworked guys having to deal with all this at the same time.
Yeah, I think the security EV just started yet. Just started. I think it's just like other technologies. The first thing that people use it because it's useful, right? So make it useful first, and then they think about security. Just like cloud, just like other things. It's not almost like security is like a second thought. But I can understand that people. Because the first thing is you have to have the business, and then you have to secure that business, right? If you don't have the business, then security is invalid. So that part I can understand. But I think we're in a sort of interesting time, with all these different technologies, EV, 5G, with all these different new technologies coming that we have to secure, but we still have to secure the other part, right? The one we had already. For example, the cloud security, it's not even being solved very well yet, but I think it almost feel like we are past that. So that's a really interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, and those EVs are almost like moving data centers themselves, right? I mean, you look at the computational power and the number of sensors that reside in those EVs, and it's absolutely incredible.
It's not just EVs, though.
But that also
buy a car today that doesn't have telematics back to the home base, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are computer systems on the EV as well. So there are actually multiple computer systems. So it's tied to not only cybersecurity but also physical security as well.
Well, and you're hitting on something on that, Tim, and that is kind of what we see as kind of the third macro trend, if you will, and that is the evolution and the kind of increasing threat landscape that's out there, right? As you introduce the edge, when you look at what's enabled through 5G, when you look at the number of devices out there, and you look at the way organizations are relying on the cloud, on the edge, and on data, it like if I'm not a good person who wants to take advantage of a company or a person or another person, man, it's a target rich environment for me, right? And there's so many ways to exploit, and that threat landscape just seems to be ever changing. And we haven't even talked about AI as a potential tool to hack, right? I mean, these are kind of scary times for us.
In terms of threat landscape, what you just talked about, I think is like the increase of attack surfaces, because when there's new technology, new point of entry, right? So that's different attack surfaces. Currently, I think we're still seeing, like the major business model is the ransomware and data leak, right? But you can see maybe not far in the future, maybe somebody can hijack your car and demand a ransom. That's fairly easy to see. Could happen, right? So but yeah. So I think we're not seeing the end of the threats yet because of this new technologies that are coming. We have not seen all the exploits that could happen on those technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think one interesting thing to extend from what Tim has mentioned is really the increasing use of social engineering techniques. So it's not just the technology that they are using or the adversaries are using against us. They are trying to manipulate our psychology as well, right? Mm-hmm. So, I'll just give you a very personal example. It's an unfortunate example. My own mother, right? She was on a scam call, right? Somebody contacted her. And interestingly, right, they pretended to be the police and said that dear lady, you are have been scammed. So it's interesting that the scammers are saying that you have been scammed as a technique, right? So this, my poor mom doesn't really understand technology very well. She uses messaging apps like WhatsApp, but that's about it, right? So they kept her on the phone for 2 hours, right? They said that you can't tell anyone, you're under investigation, right? Send us your bank details, send us your photos, send us your ID. And she did, right? So you can see we have the evidence of the WhatsApp chat messages, right, of her communicating with this person, an unknown number. You see multiple phone numbers being used. You see multiple phone numbers calling her, multiple phone numbers messaging her, right? And in the end, thankfully, just to close the loop on the story, thankfully, my mother sort of snapped out of it after 2 hours, and she called me and called my brother. And so we told her to just put it down, and we brought her to the police, made a police report. We went to the bank, closed whatever digital access that she had. And thankfully, nothing happened.
Yeah.
But man, can you imagine that on a personal level and times a million? Because there's so many vulnerable people, right, that are unfortunately not so well aware, and they're getting attacked, and that's happening to them on a daily basis, right? This kind of scams, and you sign up for this special offer, this government department is asking you to respond, or you've been hacked, had a data breach, and you need to recover, something like that. So on a personal level, this is happening. On a enterprise level, this is happening. So just as Tim mentioned, right, the techniques, the threats are getting so much worse from an individual level and a corporate level as well.
But you know what, Kenny? What's interesting about that, and we can talk about AI as a factor all day long as well, but the one thing we'll never remove from the equation is the human, right? And when you look at some of the largest hacks and attacks in history, and short history of technology, they all have one common element: a human. The largest attack in the U.S. government was in the Middle East, where a member of the service, military, saw a USB stick on the ground when they parked their Jeep. They took it in, they plugged it into their laptop to see what it was, and about a year and a half later, come to find out, it was this huge exploit of all of these military secrets. You will never remove the human element from the equation, and that's a little. It's good and it's scary at the same time.
One of the most prominent attacks in the U.S. this year, the MGM Grand Casino. It cost them close to $75 million, somewhere in that ballpark. They gained access to the network through an act of social engineering, got that foothold, and then land and expand and took over the network.
Yeah.
It's the people.
And I think the human exploits are going to get even worse with the AI, right? So you already see, phishing emails just targeting a specific person, right?
Yeah.
And there are like deepfake technologies. I think those can be very dangerous as well. People are talking about getting a phone call, right? But what if that phone call is from like your CEO? In your CEO's voice telling you to do something, right?
Yeah.
Do people have the wits to actually discern that's maybe a phony call and react, right? So I think there are certain different kind of danger that bring about with the AI technology.
Yeah,
correct. Agree. And I think just to give the analyst perspective regarding this threat landscape, because of this increasing number of threats on a personal level, right? Individuals getting scammed, as well as corporate level with the examples that you guys just mentioned. Frost & Sullivan, we expect that the regulatory environment is going to tighten even further. Mm-hmm. So it means that industry bodies, governing associations, government bodies and agencies, they're going to be putting more and more stringent requirements on the operating environment to bring back that digital trust. So that means that cybersecurity is going to be, again, become more and more vital for all organizations, not just the ones in the front line.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because we have found here in the States that, those industries that are more heavily regulated tend to be more stringent with cybersecurity. But to what you're saying, Kenny, I think that that is expanding beyond just the regulated industries, and there are cybersecurity regulations that are permeating all industries, which is a good thing. Yeah. So listen, we talked about kind of some of the macros, right? We talked about, data being king and data putting a bigger target. Talked about security landscape becoming more and more complex, and kind of the threat landscape, kind of the evolution of it becoming more challenging for organizations and individuals to deal with. What about some of the cybersecurity trends you see out there? Kenny, you do this for a living, right? Day in and day out. SecOps to kind of protecting the digital estate, if you will, to security transformation. What are you seeing? Let's start with the first one around kind of SecOps. You get some perspective on that?
Yeah. So the first big cybersecurity trend that we are predicting for 2024 is the emerging importance of security operations. And I think Tim alluded to this in our very first few conversations as well. Security operations has become such a big topic so quickly. Now, firstly, to take a step back, security operations is not new. It's been there for a long time. SIEM technology has been there for ages, right? But I think there has been very recently in the past year increased emphasis on this, right? There's the emergence of XDR, right? XDR was the trendy term of 2023. It includes the NDR part, the EDR part, and integrating the cloud part as well. So that's becoming subsumed into the SIEMs platform, the SOAR platform. We see a huge interest in this also from Cisco's intent to acquire Splunk. We see Microsoft Sentinel and so many additions to their capabilities. We've just got briefed on my end at Frost Sullivan from IBM, and they're talking about their additions to QRadar as well. So we see that all of a sudden in the space of such a short time, there's so many announcements around security operations. So we actually predict that that's going to be a huge topic area for next year.
And what do you see in this? I mean, give the Hillstone perspective, because you have a play in this, obviously, right? I mean, what's the Hillstone take?
Yeah, we see pretty much the same thing. I think this is a trend that actually people moving from pre-breach to post-breach, moving from detection, threat detection into response. Because people realize that with all these different kind of technologies, different kind of threats, it's hard to be 100%, right, in detecting everything and prevent everything. So a good response program is essential, and that actually drives all these XDRs and SIEMs to actually help the security operation to have a program that can cover all stages of their daily operation, like from the preparation to detection to incident response, etc. So we're very much on board with that trend.
Correct. Yeah. And to extend from what Tim has mentioned, he's exactly right. I mean, I think organizations in the past have always focused around protection. It means I need to have a huge firewall. I need to have very specific technology from a protection basis. So I think Tim has mentioned it great, right? It's really about moving to the next step. And many organizations are starting to do that. How do I detect these threats? Not just protect myself. How do I know there's something happening in my network, in my cloud, in my on-prem? How do I then take action using, the correlation and data integration that comes from a platform like a SIEM, and how do I automate responses using a platform like a SOAR, right? So, and this really ties back to what we talked about at the earlier section about the macro trends, right? This directly helps an organization when we talked about it from a data perspective. There's so much data everywhere. So this kind of integration platforms help. We talked about the security landscape becoming so difficult to manage with its complexity, and security operations tools can actually help you to manage as well by putting data together, correlating that together. So this security operations really ties in and tries to help organizations in their with the macro trends that we discussed as well.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'll start with you on it, Tim. XDR in particular, right? And when we talk about security operations, and we started out talking about earlier about kind of the complexity with all of these solutions that exist in the market, and a lot of organizations just have not tied them together. Even if there are integration points, we haven't seen that taking place. Have you, as Hillstone, as a company that has solutions in market, what do you see from your customers? I mean, do you see this kind of this integration of solutions coming together and this kind of this what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of centralized approach to security operations and really driving organization-wide standards, procedures, policies, and practices to try and drive that, holistic security posture?
Definitely, I think that's a major trend, and I think certain companies are probably more advanced than others. People at different stages, but I would say all the major companies are moving in that direction, and I think it's going to be a long process. As you can see, this section sort of attract different kind of vendors. From XDR vendors, from SOC, from SIEM vendors, and it's like a holy grail. You have a single pane of glass that can not only take the current tools, maybe future security tools, right? I mean, it's a good, very promising solution, but I think today is far from that. It just hides the complexity that's in the back. There's still a lot of work that's actually going on and need to make things happen. I think at this stage, people are probably in their first step. They have a one platform that may be able to collect all the data together, like Splunk or something like that. And but how do we make sense of that data? All those different data. I think it's still a start, still at the very beginning stage.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Steve, did you want to say something? I didn't mean to. Okay. So as we talk about kind of, security operations, centralizing security, kind of getting our arms around this, we're getting it around kind of one of the other trends we wanted to get your perspective on, Kenny, was kind of protecting I call it the entire digital estate, right? It's the on-prem, it's the edge, it's remote workers, it's the cloud and the clouds, right? All of the clouds that we use, kind of 2024. Do you see this as a kind of a trend that organizations are starting to wrap their heads around and figure out, or are we in trouble?
Yeah. Got it. I think one of the things that we've seen is really how organizations will continue to be hybrid, actually. So, you talked about workers going back to office. You talk about the new working environment. I think we are not going to go back to the days of pre-COVID where everybody's in the office 100% of the time. I think that day is gone, and there will be some element of hybrid. Maybe it's 90%. Maybe it's 90% at home. Maybe it's 90% in office, right? But I think that always that element of having that flexibility to work is now there. Now, with that move to that flexible workforce, it also means that organizations have to protect not just the organizational office, not just the branch, but now any cafe, in any street corner, in any bedroom, in any study, right? All these areas need to be protected because the laptop or the mobile device has become the branch of one, actually. So from that perspective, I agree with you completely, right? The edge, protecting the digital estate from an edge perspective becomes important. From on-prem perspective, I think this is the easiest one for most organizations because that's probably where they started. So in terms of their investment over the years, probably they've already protected their on-prem and on-prem kind of resources like data centers, etc. Over time. But the big trend that we see at Frost & Sullivan is really the cloud. We see survey after survey that even though organizations are jumping to the cloud, and you talk about clouds with an S, they're going multi-cloud, right? But most organizations, many of them don't actually understand the cloud adequately as well. In one survey that we've done, many organizations we have told us that they're going to the cloud. But when we ask them a testing question, so in testing questions, we basically give 4 wrong answers and 1 right one, right? So to test their true understanding, basically around 20-something% got the understanding right of their shared responsibility for protecting the cloud. Yeah. So the danger that we are starting to see is that organizations are jumping to the cloud, right, for all its benefits. But the cloud and cloud security is really the one that we see not much maturity, not much understanding. So even at Frost, when in terms of the types of reports that really get the most inquiries and questions, is all the cloud security related reports actually. So those are the ones that really are getting the most questions and queries.
Isn't that interesting though, right? As organizations, enterprise organizations are so concerned with data, right? So many of them rush so quickly into, lift and shift into the cloud because of some hype or because of some belief, without really doing due diligence around how secure is that data in the cloud? What is a shared responsibility model between a cloud provider and an enterprise? And, what are the liabilities that the cloud provider has versus, what's my that stuff doesn't seem to get considered until it's too late and the data's already been exploited or compromised. It's fascinating.
Everybody says, public cloud is the future, and we have to put it up there, right? So, but as you said, they may not have like a very, very good strategy to secure the data in the cloud yet. But it's a trend that people have to accept, that they have to accept some risks in order to embrace that technology. So,
correct. Tim, I wanted to expand from what you mentioned, because I think in the cloud environment, it's very easy to experiment, right? It's very easy to just put in your credit card, get some space, and start experimenting. So, I think a lot of projects that way. It was really experimental. It was really, a project that you do after hours, and it just started that way and expanded to become something that an organization uses. So, Tim, I wanted to get back to you, right? How do organizations sort of think about that process, right? From the experimentation of cloud moving on, and then how do we then, at which point does security come into this kind of experimentation kind of a process?
Usually it started in their pilot programs. But I think, the cloud itself is not a technology that's very transparent in how the securities are going about. There are parts of, there is this shared responsibility model that you mentioned, but it's not very clear that to each customer that what is that their responsibilities boundary, because they can actually do some security that's similar to their on-prem deployment, but there may be other attack surfaces that they may not have considered in the cloud environment. So I would say that there's still a learning process over there as well.
Yeah. Question for you, and it's kind of related to that. In the early days of smartphones and tablets, there was a real problem in IT around bring your own device, right? People were bringing their thing. They want to use your iPhone, and IT wasn't equipped to deal with that. And you made the comment, and I think it's very true, which is I can spin up an EC2 instance on Amazon with a credit card. Actually, with Amazon, I use the free tier. My IT guys may be a little slow to respond. I'm like, I'm not going to wait for these guys. I'm just going to spin it up. You're a little closer to the IT end user than I am in your work. Is that a problem for IT? And if so, how do they think about security?
Either one. Yeah. Go ahead, Kenny.
No, I just wanted to say that I think that problem of shadow IT is always going to happen. And I think exactly as you mentioned, organizations or individuals are going to try to bypass the path, the resistance that you're facing. So if IT is the resistance, I'll just use my own credit card. But I agree with you, Steve. No, sorry, back to you, Tim.
Yeah, so I think this is a problem that's always been there. Yeah, I think that's why people are nowadays are probably more focusing on like data security rather than just focusing on different kind of the technologies they use and focus on the data, how to secure the data.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you have a couple different types of companies in this world today, right? You've got the established companies that are learning how to use the cloud and learning what a shared responsibility model is and kind of, but have always done things in-house and on-prem for so long, where it's not necessarily a security first mindset. It is, but it isn't because you haven't considered the cloud. And then you have the digitally native, right? Those companies that were born in the cloud, grew in the cloud, and they thought about security from that very first line of code they wrote or that very first instance they deployed. And in some ways, it's funny because that bigger data footprint that a established company will have is coincides with, you know, an ignorance, if you will, around cloud adoption and what you need to do when you consider cloud adoption. So it's kind of a double whammy for these established organizations. And yeah, shadow IT just makes it even worse. I mean, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, for the cloud, I mean, most of the IT we deal with, I don't think they are in a security first mentality. I mean, security is still like comes second to their business. You know how the business architecture.
Yeah. I hear
reality
you.
Today.
Yeah, I hear you. I just think those though that are not those that have never had their own digital estate, kind of on-prem digital estate, don't have the luxury of relying on the infrastructure that protects that digital estate. Therefore, I think they're a little bit more thoughtful around what they do. The other thing is generational. The younger generation has an entire different perspective on this aging IT population that has done things a certain way for 30 years, and now all of a sudden they have all these other crazy considerations to take into account. Represented on this
question for Kenny. So you mentioned the cloud security. How do you see the CNAPP the security? I mean, how do you see that trend comes about? I mean, is it fairly deep or is it just the beginning right now?
Cloud native, right? Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Correct. I think organizations, because one of the things that we see is that organizations are mostly hybrid. That means that they use some on-prem and some cloud. So that really, to really have that transition back and forth. And we've heard of this, especially when interest rates are now at a relatively high rate. We see that some organizations are repatriating data from cloud back on-prem. So that flexibility, right? Actually, the whole premise of this hybrid cloud is for that flexibility, which is one of the benefits of that. But to really benefit from this, it really also requires cloud native kind of applications like Tim mentioned. I see that this is definitely something that is on trend. I see that organizations are definitely exploring this. I don't know how many organizations really are fully invested in cloud native yet, though. Right. So I still see that some silo kind of applications sometimes where something is built pure for cloud, and some other stuff that has been purely made for the legacy environment on-prem. I think that will continue to change because as these projects sort of reach end of life or need to be refreshed, then generally speaking, organizations would move towards cloud native approaches because that makes the most sense in today's kind of flexible kind of computing environments.
Okay.
So I agree with you, Tim. I think I see that as a trend as well.
So let's hit on one more trend, if you don't mind. And Kenny, I'm going to start with you again, but I want to talk about kind of, and we danced around this a little bit, talked around it a little bit, but security transformation, kind of where are organizations going? Where do you see organizations kind of entering and exiting 2024 from a, transforming their security posture and operations perspective?
Got it. So one of the biggest areas of cybersecurity spending across the entire industry is actually the network security space. So network firewalls. So this is a very fundamental piece of technology. It's been there for years and years. I would consider this as one of the most mature solution areas in cybersecurity, right? And everybody would have some sort of firewall in their organization. Now, the transformation regarding this is that network security and the firewall has now become a platform of sorts, right? There's so many different kind of solutions and applications that you can put on top of it, right? So you can have a firewall that has VPN capabilities. It has email security capabilities sometimes. Now we are starting to see the transformation happening so that you can have SD-WAN capabilities, right? So SD-WAN would allow you to work with your telco so that you can optimize your connectivity, sometimes even reduce costing, right? By reducing reliance on dedicated lines and going to public internet and having that flexibility requires an SD-WAN capability. And what we see is that this network firewall can now put in SD-WAN, right? And it can now go to the cloud. And that really transformed this into the term that you hear again and again in the market, SASE, right? So SASE is really security delivered through the cloud, right? Network firewall functionality delivered through the cloud with SD-WAN capabilities. Another one we always hear is SSE. SSE is the security functionality delivered through cloud, but without the SD-WAN routing capabilities. But cloud delivered is becoming something that organizations are having to incorporate because we talked about the changing workforce. We talked about how branches are popping up everywhere, right? So for a branch that maybe only has 5 to 10 people, does it make sense to fly a IT team down to install a firewall infrastructure around a particular small office? Or does it make sense for me to just deploy something, maybe using SASE via the cloud, right? So the integration of these new forms of technology, right, that extend from the network security, SASE, SSE, is where we see the security transformation happening.
Makes sense. Tim, do you?
Yeah, exactly. I think I think in this case, we fully agree with what Kenny had just said. From our old IT guys, we talk about client-server applications, right? And today, most of the applications we use are still client-server. It's just the client we don't know where they are, right? It could be remote workforce, it could be your laptop or mobile phone, whatever. And now the server is also, you can't tell where it is, right? Maybe on Azure, maybe on AWS or something. So it sort of it blurred the path between the client server. So what does the data need to go through, right? The old ways, you still need to go to the headquarters before you go to the server. But nowadays, the SASE and ZTNA, all those different technologies, sort of give you a different computation model, allow you to basically access the application from anywhere. That's sort of the promise that the cloud technology is giving you.
Yeah, the good and the bad. So, all right. So we hit on macro, right? We hit on some of the macro trends that we're seeing out there. We hit on some of the kind of cybersecurity specific trends we're seeing out there. Let's move to 2024. I know we've been going for a while, but I want to get some quick hit thoughts from our resident expert, Kenny, and the guru, Tim, on 2024 and what you see kind of emerging in 2024. The big, these things are definitely going to happen and it's going to change the world kind of predictions. Maybe not that drastic, but you get what I'm saying. We'll start with you.
Can I go first? Because I think, I want to give Kenny the last word because, I think, from a vendor point of view, we're probably a little bit more focused, a little bit narrow rather than from the analyst point of view. From a vendor point of view, I think from the threat perspective, I think, a lot of things are going to stay the same. As I just said, there's basically two major threats. It's still going to be ransomware and data leak. So, deal with ransomware and have a data centric security program is going to help you on that. I think my second point is, there are things are not new things are coming out, right? So I need to worry about. There's new attack surfaces because of AI, because of the cloud, that you need to worry about, be aware of those technology. I think the AI technology is also going to extend the cloud adoption as well. There are new tools, new security tools from the hackers that need to be aware about in terms of phishing, in terms of other attack capabilities that need to worry about. So that's sort of the two things I want to point out.
Very good.
Got it.
All right.
And Tim, I agree with you completely in the sense that I think many organizations are really seduced by cybersecurity marketing, seduced in a way that it's a new thing, it's a new technology, it's a new bells and whistles, right? But just like Tim mentioned, fundamentally it's going to be the same very basic kind of things that will happen again and again. Ransomware, he mentioned about data and data security. So I think organizations really need to focus on the basics first. Are we even patching correctly in a adequate manner? Are we checking for vulnerabilities? Is there a vulnerability management process? Patching process, is that institutionalized? Is there training? Right? Because we talk about security and security technology today, but really it's also about technology training, right? Our staff trained.
Yep.
Are our management teams trained? Right, our board level members trained, because board level members typically are very senior in the industry, had been around for a while, but they may not be even trained on what a ransomware means, what a phishing means, right? So are they even aware from that perspective? So cybersecurity really is so wide. It's really not just a technology discussion. And those aspects are just as important. I have only one other thing to add beyond what Tim has mentioned. It's really something that we looking forward to in 2024, but we also want to observe. Of course, it's generative AI. We have to end there, right? Well,
yeah.
you just think about the hype around this term that has popped up in such a short time. If you just look at it from a timeline perspective, it's only been a year, and this term has really dominated the tech industry in terms of talking point. Now, to me, the rubber meets the road next year. Right, everybody says that I'm going to be able to integrate Gen AI into cybersecurity. Everybody says that. Every vendor is saying that. So I want to see it, because I really, beyond canned demos, I haven't really seen how it's effective and how it really makes a difference. So next year, that's something that we're going to really be looking out for.
Kenny,
that's an interesting point. Kenny, can I ask you a question about generative AI?
Yeah, sure.
Are those because generative AI is based on large language models, right? So most of the generative AI applications that I see is actually on the SIEM side and on the XDR side. Just try to make sense of the sea of data that's been collected, and logs or events or things like that. So I have not seen generative AI being used on other stuff, like on the, for example, flow data or traffic data or things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree. Yeah, I think the ones that you mentioned, the demos or the announcements that have been mentioned have been around the human interface. That means how do the human analysts sort of manipulate or query the data a bit more effectively using a large language model with support. Yes. So yeah, that's the extent that we've seen. But like you mentioned, Tim, I think technology is moving so fast.
Yes.
Something may pop up in the next 6 to 12 months that we wouldn't even have expected.
So Kenny, you're talking about using generative AI on the protection side. Do you think this year in 2024 we're going to see the bad guys using generative AI? I mean, phishing is going to get a lot more sophisticated, I think.
Yes, I think so. If you're just going for any kind of cybersecurity basic training, they will always say for phishing emails, look out for bad spelling, bad phrasing. Now that's out the window, right? Because you can very easily get very nicely worded emails, very specific through this kind of technology. I think it's going to get worse because we already see how Microsoft is demoing code generation, right? And how the developers can be so much more efficient using Gen AI to generate code, to do debugging.
Yeah.
Not only the good guys have this, right? So the adversaries would have the similar tools in some form or manner that would make them more effective, more efficient, more quick. So this means that vulnerabilities are going to come up and be exploited quicker. It means that very specific social engineering techniques are going to be harder to spot. It means that phishing emails are going to look more and more polished to the point of almost indistinguishable. You can't really distinguish that anymore. So, Steve, I hear you, man. I think it's only going to be used in both sides, and it's going to be a challenge for the regular Joe.
Yeah, and you raised that. I didn't even think about it being used to generate malicious code, right? But we can ask it to write test or debug code, right? So. Yep.
It truly democratizes hacking. I mean, as crazy as that sounds. I mean, we always use democratizing as in a good kind of context, but in this context, it enables average smart people who don't understand technology to all of a sudden use technology for not good purposes, right? It's crazy. Hey, one last thing I want to touch on before I go, Kenny, and you hit on this, kind of with all of the technology. One of the things we hear, and when you think about kind of security practices, is kind of the 4 Ps, right? Policy, procedure, practice, and people, right? So the training, setting policy, making sure they're adhered to, testing your environment continually to assure, and people. We go back to people, right? And you're right. I mean, regardless of all the technology out there, if you don't have a solid practice in place, the technology doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the biggest gap that we've seen is really at management and board level, right? Mm-hmm. I think that many organizations would have some, even the most basic training. And even if this is not done at organizational level, certain governments may do it, or certain counties may have some sort of free materials out there to do that. But when you talk about it from a management perspective and board level perspective, I don't think that's done enough. My personal view, right? I think there is still a very big gap in understanding. Right? We did a focus group. So what we did is we gotten a group of CEOs together for a government agency, and we wanted to better understand cybersecurity leadership. So we asked a very simple question to these business leaders. We said that, hey, do you think, in your opinion, it's very important to talk about cybersecurity at the management and the board level? And unanimously, everybody said, yes, very vital, very, very important. Then we asked the second question. How often is cybersecurity on the board and management agenda? And then
not much.
Not much at all, right? Yeah. We only had one very large mature organization that really mentioned that is on a regular cadence in terms of insertion into the agenda. In most other cases, it's not. That means it's only when something happens, then I'll talk about it, right? So that really reflects, again, the importance of the management level, understanding the issues, and the board of directors, understanding the issues enough to hold the management accountable. Because let's be real, right? The guys on the ground are trying their best. We talked about overlooked teams, but the management and the heads of the organization really need to lead the charge.
Yep.
Yeah, people like to be like to say that they care about security, but underneath it's still behind the business itself.
They care. They just don't care enough to do something about it.
Yeah.
You talk about it.
Until something happens.
Until something happens. Yeah. On that note, I think it's a great place to kind of close out. Kenny, this was like super, super insightful. And really the combination of Kenny and Tim kind of giving, kind of an outside view versus the Hillstone view, the compare and contrast where we were aligned. And it was super interesting to kind of be a part of. So thank you both for being a part of this discussion. And Steve, this is it for 2024. It's been a great year.
I'm a little sad, Matt, but it's been fun.
A little sad. Gents, thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah.
Have a great
Kenny.
rest of the year.
Yeah.